Whether you're conquering professional exams or personal milestones, we welcome you to Beyond Clean's Confidence Certification, the 52-week test prep podcast series. With expert insights, actionable tips, and engaging discussions, we'll break down the toughest concepts in sterile processing and build your confidence every step of the way. Join host Sarah B. Cruz as she embarks on a mission to help you not just prep for tests, but craft your success story. And now your host, Sarah B. Cruz.
Hello and welcome. You're listening to Confidence Certification, a 52-week test prep podcast series to equip you to take your sterile processing career to the next level. I'm your host, Sarah B. Cruz, and on this episode, we will be talking about SMART objectives. And you're like, wait a minute, Sarah, we talked about that already last week. And that's true. So if you didn't hear last week's little bit longer episode, put a pin in this one. Go back and check out last episode and come back because we're going to actually be taking all of the letters of SMART and trying to figure out which one actually talks about your SMART style. Yeah, so this kind of resonates with what we did last, maybe in the beginning of the season, where we talked about study style. And we can't talk about our style without including our work BFF, Bobby Parker. Hey, Bobby, welcome back.
Hey, Sarah. Thanks for having me back on the show. Excited to be back in this season talking about confidence certification. And thanks for inviting me in again to the style conversation. I have a feeling that you're bringing me on this show just to make fun of my personal style, Sarah. It's the hook to keep them coming back. But yeah, happy to be here to talk
about it. And style is so unique. You remember, and don't forget when we talked about style the first time in our study skills, style is unique to you. And even when styles go out of fashion, if they resonate with you, you keep rocking them, right? So as we talk about your objective style, we want to make sure that it is thinking of you, not the person you work next to, not Bobby, not me, but who is actually going to be applying this style? Yourself. Right, Bobby? So don't worry. I think you're great. I'm not making fun of you.
No, I appreciate you. I appreciate you. When I think about SMART goals in particular and just goal setting specifically, sometimes that feels like a cheese grater being rubbed against my face. Like, being told, gosh, I got to set more goals and they've got to meet all of these criteria. And so I'm looking forward to hearing more about your thoughts of how to make them work for you and how to fit SMART goals into kind of your personal preference. And you said something interesting just then about setting objectives. And so maybe, Sarah, you could tell us a little bit about like what are objective styles.
Yeah. So just remember, style is the way in which we do things, our je ne sais quoi, dare I say. So we see style in everything we do, from how we dress, from how we speak. It's an extension of ourselves and our personality. So when we start to talk about objective style, we're looking at how we're going to make goals feed into our mission that are unique to us. So we can't take a list of other people's shoulds and make them our musts. And if they ever feel like have tos, you're already out of line with your objective style.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And so our objectives, our goals have style just the way that we carry ourselves. But why is it important to figure out what our objective style is? I mean, why does it matter? Why can't we just tell people to buckle up their boots and get it done?
Oh, yeah, sure. And I think we've all gone through that. And think of your lived experience where someone said, just sit down and do your homework. I hated doing my homework, okay? The fact that we had to come home with stuff after I spent 8 hours in school, that was a wrap. And then I paid for that when I went to college. Oh, no, that's enough of that. But it's because I didn't like doing homework because someone was telling me how I needed to learn. So that's why style is important. The moment I started to realize that I preferred reading the book and working on my own, and then I actually started to include audio where the book was read to me, that's when I actually started to achieve the things that I set out to do. So that's why style is important, and making it unique to yourself, and even having an objective style, because it's going to be the difference between leaving something unchecked on a to-do list to actually incorporating it into your professional goals and your confidence certification.
So You touched a nerve there when you said leaving something unchecked on your to-do list. That is kind of my default of how I get things done, particularly here at Beyond Clean. I have an ever-rising tide of to-do lists that I'm trying to reprioritize on the daily. And so I can appreciate that in terms of setting smart goals for yourself not to get swallowed in the to-do list so that they don't end up being just a list of things that you can't ever get done, because there's some despair that's tied up in just continually not getting done the things that you set out.
Bobby, I that hits a nerve with me because I actually call them to don't lists. Don't make them. How many times do we make a list to just put things we've already completed on it to check it off, to get that nice quick, that endorphin hit where it's like, I'm accomplishing things. It's like, you already did that. You can't add it to your to-do list just to check it off. You're cheating. So I call them to don't lists.
That's too good. That's too good. So last time we talked about style, we were getting at learning style and how to study. Looking forward to diving in a little bit deeper into how to set goals, kind of where your natural pitfalls are maybe with goal setting and how to set some successful objectives. But maybe before we jump into it, what do you say we take a mid-session break?
Oh yeah, we always need a little confident boost and a word from our sponsors. It's time for our mid-episode confidence boost, where we focus on a key sterile processing test concept. Now, there's no guarantee these concepts will be on the test that you take, but they are key concepts to the workplace and are discussed in the literature. Today we'll cover cavitation. Cavitation is a mechanical practice performed by an ultrasonic cleaner in our decontamination area. Ultrasonic cleaners transmit sound waves through a cleaning solution that create bubbles that implode, also known as bursting inward, as they contact the instrument, drawing the soil away from the surface. So if you need a little bit of an image, it's sort of like opening a soda bottle and you see all the bubbles fizz to the top. It's just like that, but instead of exploding outwards, the bubbles are exploding inwards and pulling the debris off of our surgical instruments. Cavitation is effective in cleaning hard-to-reach areas such as box locks, serrations, ratchet, and the teeth on instruments. Its design is to help us clean and attack the microbial life that is microscopic, the debris we can't see. It's important to have effective and rigorous manual cleaning practices before placing instruments into the ultrasonic cleaners, because cavitation only works as well as we prepare our sets, and how effectively these bubbles come into contact with the instrumentation depend on how much of the gross soil we remove prior to placing them for cavitation. So be wary of stacking your single chamber sonics, the rubber mats and sets that can dampen the sound waves, and the amount of debris that's being left behind. That's going to wrap this week's mid-session confidence boost. Good luck.
All right, and welcome back to our discussion on smart styles. And I've got our host, Sarah B. Cruz, here with me to talk about how to build an objective style, or maybe not build one, but how to discover what is your particular style in goal setting. And Sarah, you are laying this out for us along that structure of smart styles from the last episode. Is that right?
Correct. So as we move into the second half of our episode, it's going to be really important that you understand what all of the letters SMART and even ER, your smarter goals, stand for. So again, if you haven't listened to the previous episode, give this a pause, go back. I hope you're checking in every week though, and you're keeping up with it. And if you are, don't forget to reach out to us at info@BeyondClean. But again, put a little pause here, go back and listen, because like Bobby said, we're going to actually break down where you might be. Are you an S? Are you an M? Are you T for time bound? Due dates, right? So go ahead, check that out, and let's see if we can get a letter ascribed to your style so that you're thriving as you achieve your certification.
Perfect. And I've already done my homework. I listened into the episode, so I am ready to roll. So let me pitch the questions to you for this, Sarah. Let's start out with S. Tell us a little bit about that sensible and specific goal setting style.
All right. So if you're an S style, sensible and specific, you know the who, what, when, and how of your objectives, because you're being very purposeful and direct with why you're even setting them. them. So that sensible aspect comes in because you're very close to your goals. You understand where you're going, what you want to do. So it only makes sense to you to be specific in your approach about them. And directness is a key indicator of this. So if someone's ever called you blunt or frank, you may be a sensible and a specific objective style setter.
That sounds like my kind of people, Sarah. So I want to make sure that we tie this in specifically to our sterile processing audience and how things get done in the department, and particularly related to certification study. So how might a sensible and specific goal setter apply kind of that knowledge to preparing for an exam or maybe working day to day in a sterile processing department?
Oh, yeah, sure. So first of all, if you're the person that will literally stop everything what they're doing to run that Bowie bio at 12:01 in the morning in your 24-hour facility, you may be sensible and specific. Like you'll literally stop doing anything you're doing, even though you're not running an autoclave, and will go and do that. That's because you've made almost like in your head a sequential step of actions that need to be done. They're very specific. So if you're that type of person that drops everything that they're doing and they run right to the autoclave at that time, that might be a hint. Or if you're the type of person that has set aside study time, you were probably really purposeful picking out when you were going to study. Bobby, that's not me. I'm like, oh, I got 20 minutes. Let's just give the book a whirl, and you guys all heard in the first season how that worked out for me. So, kudos to the people that have already figured that out. But if you've already set that time frame for yourself, that's specific because that's sensible to you. You're saying, I'm going to put this on here. I'm going to get the reminder from my Google Calendar and I'm going to work it. So those are some indications where you might start to see sensible and specific in your workplace or even in your budding study style, dare I say, or objective style.
It sounds to me like they're pretty detail oriented. And as you described that, I'm just picturing my wife who always has a million things going at the same time. And I don't know if it's just the male brain where I can't keep track of all of that at the same time, but I find those people to be a bit exhausting. Not that my wife is exhausting, but you get what
lovely.
I'm saying. She's lovely. I think the thought of keeping track of that much stuff at the same time is exhausting. And so tell me a little bit about how these people can and should succeed as they're making their goals. They're kind of detail people. What kind of information do they need to pull together to make some successful study goals?
Oh, yeah, sure. So let me give you some questions, some probing questions that you could apply to even see if you are an S or if you're sensible or specific. So if these questions start to resonate with our listeners, these are some pretty big indicators of that. If you already know and can tell that you're an S or a sensible and specific, objective style, ask yourselves these questions. Who are you going to get involved in your sensible and specific goals? A lot of the times these individuals need to reach out and include people because they can really silo themselves and take on the weight of everything all at once. And I also want to challenge you to think of what goals do I want to achieve? Because like I said, if you have a million things going at once, sometimes a lot of the actionable items that you're working on can be put into categories or funnels, and they can be grouped more accordingly. So you're not all over the place all at once. You're kind of focusing on these core style aspects. And then what resources are available to you? Again, S people tend to silo themselves off. So reach out to resources, people, places, books, whatever you need to. And if you're telling yourself, well, I don't need to, you may be an S person. Okay. And then the most important, in my opinion, is why is the goal important? And that's really big for sensible and specific people because they usually get caught up on the action of completing it that they forget why they're doing it. So you've studied really hard, you've set your sensible and specific goals, and you pass your certification. Now what? What were you even doing it for? And that can be really great to keep you engaged in your study, especially when you're starting to feel fatigue or maybe some study burnout. And it helps you understand where it leads to your vision, because that why and why you're even going through all that, that's ultimately your vision, making sure you pass the test. Yeah.
Yeah, we want to avoid that now what moment. It reminds me of the end of that Finding Nemo movie whenever they're trying to escape from the fish tank. And then the movie ends with them in their plastic bags bobbing out in the ocean. It's like, okay, now what's next? So, yeah, getting through those specifics of how do we get out of the fish tank, really important. It removes all the vagueness from your objectives. You've got clear path charted forward, but you might need some help from some thinkers and dreamers, some visionaries to help chart a course for you so that you don't get caught up in just checking all the boxes and not really thinking about where you're moving forward.
Right. Well said.
Yeah. Let's consider the next letter, the M. This is the person who measures things and has manageable types of goals. Tell me a little bit about them and maybe what their relationship is to another one that it's pretty similar in that T, the time-bound person.
Yeah. So when I talk about measurable individuals, I pull T into that. Time-bound is a great check and balance for M. So if you resonate with the M objective styles, I'm going to ask you to really consider the time bound as a way to make sure you're staying focused and that you are measuring your goals accordingly, because time bound also makes things manageable. That's right. All these letters work together. So a big aspect of the M and the T is that you complete objectives in a frame of time that works within your goals. The big thing about measurability is that you have something to measure it against. Are you measuring it that you got a 90 on your test? Are you measuring it that you completed the chapter that you selected to do in that night? I mean, sometimes our measurable goals are, I got through 2 pages of the decontamination chapter, which we all know is a doozy, okay? Or I learned how to don PPEs and memorized how to doff them, for my test. So when you're working on that, it's important that you set time limits to complete. So if you are a measurable or manageable type of style, please consider bringing time bound in, even though I'm sure a lot of us hate timelines, such as myself. Yeah.
For sure. And Sarah, as we've talked and have gotten to know a little bit about your style and how much you preach, like setting things where you can measure your progress along the way and celebrate those wins, I suspect that this is kind of your home base. Am I right in the M and T world?
Oh yeah, 100%. I'm all about creating the physical indicators of success. If it's not tangible, then it's not a goal, in my own personal opinion. Goals are not philosophical. They're things you can see, touch, smell. That's weird, but they're real living things. They're living, they're breathing, they're an extension of you. And if you're just talking about them, they're just a wish.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of wisdom in bringing this into your style, even if this isn't comfortable for you, particularly that time-bound piece of it, and also particularly for our sensible and specifics who make the long checklist and have all of the jobs that they need to get done. It could be easy to get tied up in doing the wrong thing for too long. And so having some priorities that are time bound of when we're going to achieve things and prioritizing them based on those times can be really important. Sarah, as we're thinking about the M and the T for certification, prep, study, or even just on the day-to-day in the sterile processing department, what are some activities that might indicate somebody would be an M or a T style?
Yeah, sure. So M specifically, you can ask yourself, what can I do today? That's measurable. That's manageable. A lot of the times when we're looking at goals, we're looking at the finish line. But a lot of people forget that passing our certification test is the work that we do along the way. Even the people who wait until the night before to cram study, that is still the steps along the way to your finish line. So trying to figure out what you can do in a day. What are you going to do 6 weeks from now, 6 months from now? Seeing how you can make goals stack on top of each other is really key when you're looking at measurable and manageable. So if you're shoving a year's worth of goals, or if you want to take your test in a year from now, in my state, you have 18 months to get certified from the moment you get your first job. So if you're going to spend a year studying, I don't recommend the whole 18 months because if you fail, you need time to make up for it, as we all learned through me. And then why are you trying to shove the entire year in the night before? So it works both ways. So those are some really key indicators for measurability. And then when you're looking at time bound, it's really all these how-based questions. How much and how many? How much are you going to put into studying? How many chapters are you going to read? How are you going to get the time and the space, and when will it happen? How do I know when it's done? Anytime you ask yourself a how question, it's usually specific to time bound. And a lot of the times we think of when we think of time, but it's really how, because time bound is begging us to set an end date. And like Bobby was alluding to, as someone who suffers from hyperfocus or task paralysis, which are on opposite sides of the spectrum, I need a designated amount of time to work on something, because I will work on one small thing for days, when I should have really only spent a half hour on it. Or the opposite of task paralysis, where I'll see how much I have to do, so I won't do anything. So those are some of our probes, what, measurable, how, time bound.
The task paralysis probably strikes more of a chord with me. I remember getting started in college and getting accustomed to that syllabus shock thing that happens that first week of courses, where you have all these different courses that lay out everything you have to get done for the whole semester. And it took a wise friend and one like office desk size calendar and a ballpoint pen to help me deal with some of that stress and chart a plan and be able to figure out when and how to accomplish all these tasks along the way. And that can be a big stress reliever. So definitely some big benefits to doing that. So let's move on to our letter A, which are achievable goals or attainable goals. Tell me a little bit about this objective style, our achievable, attainable people.
Yeah, sure. So I think that a lot of people think they're an A, because what's the point in making a goal if you're not going to achieve it or attain it, right? So everybody's like, I don't need all of this. I'm an A. I'm going to get it done. If you've been described as a go-getter or a type A personality, you may be achievable and attainable, because that means that your objectives are realistic and within grasp. And you think everything is within grasp, right? Like all you got to do is put your hand out and it's right there. You just got to reach a little bit further. But being able to actualize your objective progress and how you gauge your success is really one of your biggest strong suits, because that's a big part of achievable and obtainable, is that you know how to gauge when you're moving in the right direction. And that's why a lot of people aren't A's, okay? Just because you're in action doesn't mean you're in progress. We've all seen the hamster running on the wheel and it's not going anywhere. We've all done a rapid turnover for a set that never gets open. Okay. So all your action isn't necessarily purposeful or leading to progress.
Right. So just because you live in the world of attainable doesn't mean that they're SMART goals, right?
Correct.
When you describe this, it reminds me of a time in my career where I was working in sterile processing as a manager, and I had a director. Actually, it was Hank Balch, who many of you know. And working for Hank was a lot of fun. We did a lot of great things together, but it also stressed me out in some ways, because Hank has a great idea of, some of them were great. Hank has a new idea of what next big and great thing we're going to do every 30 minutes, right? And I tend to be a little less in the clouds and more boots on the ground of, okay, how are we actually going to accomplish those things? And so when you talk about achievable and attainable, I think we made a pretty good duo of, I was always trying to figure out which of these great Hank ideas could we actually accomplish and attain. I was kind of the guy who shot the holes in the ideas, and Hank kept pumping them out until we found one I couldn't shoot any holes in. And so I think maybe A would be a good fit for where I'm at. But I do appreciate those guardrails that you put up, because if we just see ourselves as people who shoot holes in big ideas, or people who only accomplish the things that are kind of the mundane of what we were already planning on doing anyway, that's not really goal setting and achieving something. So I have to stretch myself sometimes to do a bit of dreaming to make sure that I don't end up being that hamster.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And because your goals are always one or two steps outside of your comfort zone, and those are some of the questions that you could actually ask yourself that you were actually alluding to while you were sharing your Hank Balch story. I feel like we all have a Hank Balch story, right? So some of the things that you referenced there is, what constraints am I working against? That's something we can ask ourselves if we're type A's, dare I say. And what personal constraints do I have? Because remember, our constraints define our comfort zone. Yeah. Personal constraints and perceived constraints, the bullet, the holes you were trying to poke inside of the idea. All right. And then who is influencing my objective? Do I have someone that I'm working with? And does my objective lead to my goal? We could have great ideas and we could invest the time into it, and they can certainly be attainable and achievable, but are they moving you in the right direction? So really, are you grounded in your objectives, and do they actually, well, as the kids say now, do they actually slap? Like, do they actually hit with what you're trying to do? Because I can get a lot done that doesn't really get me anywhere, you know? So, but I did it and I checked it off.
No, that's perfect. So as we keep moving through this, let's come to our last letter, not last letter in SMART, but the one we haven't addressed yet. And that is our R's out there, people who are about relevant and realization type goals. Tell me a little bit about these folks.
Yeah, I think the biggest indication that you're about the R life and the relevant and the realization is that you're inspired by your actions when you see yourself in them. These individuals are not just seeing a problem, they're seeing how they solve the problem. And that's really big in your study styles because they're not just falling victim to the fact that they have to study or that they're not certified. You know, a lot of the times we victimize ourselves in our own professional pursuits and study pursuits because we have all these very realistic constraints and concerns and pressing, obligations. So we stop before we even start. These are individuals literally put themselves in the goal to push through. So if you don't have an R friend, get an R friend and make them your study buddy. Yeah.
What I like about that relevant and realization piece of it and kind of seeing yourself in it is these are the folks that often get the why, right? It's the polar opposite of the person who gets stuck in the details and forgets the bigger picture. These are the people who want to walk the journey and are doing it for a purposeful mission, right? And yeah, I like that advice of bringing them along in the study, because when you're in the throes of despair of like, how am I ever going to get through this? They're the person that's going to remind you about the value of like, why are we punishing ourselves with all this certification study? And it's not just a piece of paper, right? It's about what we're doing for patients or this career, or maybe it's your family and what those motives are. And so, yeah, absolutely important being able to make sure that your goals are relevant to you and personal to you. So
exactly. And I think another aspect that you started to touch on is that our people have a good perception of self. I mean, listen, they're all that in a bag of chips, and they might know what type of chip they are. I'm just saying, okay? So when you sit in this space and your perception of self is good, you are unstoppable. And think about how much of our self-limiting perceptions and beliefs that we have that keep us from progressing in our study. I can't get it done. It's too much. I'm having a hard day. And all realistic things, but our people are, very like, it's a lot going on, but I got this.
Perfect. So as we wrap here, Sarah, let me see if I can summarize this for us. And if I don't, just no, Bobby, you got it wrong. So if you are somebody who is more of a checklist type person, gets all of it done and wants to make sure that you nail all the specifics, you might fall more into that S category. For those who like to measure their progress and make sure things are done on time and make sure that things are manageable as they're moving through them, you might be M, or maybe with a touch of T. And our folks who are making sure that we're not living with heads in the clouds and always wanting to make sure that we can accomplish the goals and understanding the obstacles and constraints that they need to work against are probably more of the A type of goal setters. And then those who are thinking about the journey and making sure that what they're trying to accomplish is actually a good fit for them personally are probably the R folks. Do you think that's an appropriate summary?
Yeah, I think that nails it. And the biggest challenge with SMART goals is realizing what your SMART style is and then trying to incorporate the rest of them in it. Okay, so that's actually going to be the homework assignment for today. When you listen to the SMART, S-M-A-R-T, and even ER, Smarter Goals episode last week, which one of these resonated with you? And as Bobby and I talked today, which style did you go, oh, that's me, or go, oh, that's me, right? So which letter were you vibing with? And it's important because lean into that. And then the one you begrudged, like me in Time Bound, step into that one too. You don't have to be a master at it, but all of these letters come together to check and balance themselves. An S with an A, an M with a T, and an R is just moving everybody along into the future. So let's go ahead and thank our work BFF, Bobby Parker, again. Thanks, Bobby. Always love having you on the show.
Thanks for dropping some knowledge on us today, Sarah. It was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. And that's going to do it for this week's episode. For more sterile processing education and resources, make sure to visit beyondclean.net or follow Beyond Clean on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. And don't forget to check out over 1,000 SPD-related videos at youtube.com/beyondclean. If you have any questions or comments for the show, you can reach out to info@beyondclean.net. Finally, make sure to download the Beyond Clean mobile app on the Apple and Android app stores so that you don't miss a future episode of any of the other awesome Beyond Clean podcasts. My name's Sarah B. Cruz, and you've been listening to Confidence Certification. Until next time, keep fighting dirty and pass that test with confidence.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast series are of Sarah B. Cruz only and do not represent the companies she works for or collaborates with.